Greetings, friends and fellow freelancers. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Mercenary. Apologies a little bit for the obvious destruction on the set, but since we're talking about a slightly more casual topic this week, I figured I'd leave things a little to the winds, as it were. Because while up until this point I've mainly talked about publishing, I've talked about different platforms you can use, I've talked about ways you can make sales, there are other ways to make a living in the TTRPG space, and one of those that has emerged in the past couple of years and isn't going away is being a paid game master. And this is kind of a divisive topic among a lot of people, so I wanted to take this week to weigh in as to what some of the things I think people are missing about it are, but not just that, I also wanted to cover the things that will make you a successful paid GM. Because though handing over cash for this experience is a little novel and kind of new, being compensated for sitting in the big chair is by no means a new experience in this particular hobby. So, before I get to the business side of things, I'd like to take a few moments to explain exactly what paid GMing is and what it isn't, and what some of the things people seem to be deliberately misconstruing about it are. So, before we move on, let's get to that. Now, I want to start with something of a disclaimer, because like I said, this is a bit of a contentious topic among a lot of people. However, I feel that the reason it is so contentious is there are a lot of people out there who are running games as storytellers, as game masters, and they're wondering why they're doing for free what other people are getting paid for. And I feel that that feeling comes from a very confused place. Because I will agree, game mastering is game mastering. No matter who you run for, no matter whether you use your own homebrew world or whether you run out of the can with a pre-made module, a pre-made adventure path, you're still a game master. But there is a huge difference between doing something for fun with your friends and doing something as a job. I say this as someone who has written for fun and who has written professionally, both for fiction and for making videos, for audio dramas, for making TTRPG content. There is a huge difference between making things for yourself and your inner circle and doing things you enjoy and doing it for the mass market and doing it for customers and clients. For a good example, oftentimes when we run games for people in our circles, for people we like, for people we're friends with, we have a back and forth with them. We have an ongoing relationship. We want to unfold the story, but we also want to have our own fun, and we want to tell the tale that we have in our minds that we're hoping they'll enjoy. And a lot of the time, you'll hear the phrase of the game master is a player at the table as well, and they should have fun. When you're being paid to be a GM, the money is a lot of the time your compensation. As a good example, while being paid in cash to be a game master might be a little new as far as the past couple of years go, the idea of being compensated for being a game master is not new in any stretch of the imagination. For myself, there are two smaller conventions out in Chicago that I can only attend because they would comp my badge if I ran games. I have friends who would run games at Gen Con. They would not only get their badge covered, which is a lot these days if you haven't been to Gen Con, they would also get free hotel space, which is another couple $100s. So the idea of being given stuff to run games, particularly if those games are for events or if they're games that you might not want to run personally, but this is what the audience and the client is asking for, is not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination. But a lot of the time we forget that the difference between just running a game for yourself or for your inner circle and running a game for clients who may want you to run a system that you are not enthused by, who may want a plot line that you normally wouldn't be drawn to, or who want to deal with subject matter that other people just aren't comfortable with. These are all things that you're going to have to deal with as a paid GM, and you're going to have to ask yourself, is this job worth the money? Because it's still several hours of having to turn on your charisma, of having to turn on your storyteller mask, and to make sure that everyone around you is enjoying themselves, is having fun, and that you are more or less chaperoning them through the experience that they paid for. And while that can still be enjoyable, you can still get that good feeling of being a game master and watching your players' faces light up, watching them really, sink that final blow or make the discovery and the mystery. It's important to remember that you're not doing this for your own enjoyment, your own satisfaction. You're not doing it because the people around the table are your friends. You're doing this because you were paid to do it. In much the same way that if a client asks you to do revisions for a manuscript for their world building, you're not allowed to just go off on tangents that you think would make it better unless the client approves it. You have to, stay in the lane you're paid to stay in, and that is something that I think is very important that we need to keep in mind going forward, especially if you're thinking about giving being a paid game master a go. Because the first thing you need to do is take your ego out of the equation and remember that while it's nice if you can have fun with a job, you're not here to have fun. You're here to provide a service, and you're here to make sure that your clients get what they paid for. Now, that gets us into the next topic, which is what does it take to be a paid game master? So, you've decided even after hearing all of that, you still want to try being a paid game master. I salute you. So what are the things you're going to need? First and foremost, you need knowledge of the game that you're going to run, or games, because the more games that you are capable of running, the more clients that you can find, and the better off your business is going to do overall. However, you also need experience as a game master. And I say, it seems obvious, but I say this because it's important to remember that you need to not just be a game master for one group or for just your friends. You really need a wider breadth of experience so that you know how to handle all the different things that you could possibly run into. Because a lot of the time when you get paid to run a game, you're not being paid by people you know well, you're not being paid by people you're familiar with. So being able to handle all of the different things that are likely to come your way is very important. To that end, while running for friends and family is still good practice, and I do recommend folks do that first because it's a kinder, gentler environment and people will be way more forgiving of your mistakes. Consider running for events, for organizations, or similar things in your area. If you have a convention that you attend regularly, see whether it's possible to volunteer as a game master for those events, whether the convention itself needs game masters to run things, or whether there are companies that are participating in it that allow you to sign up and run games for them. On the one hand, this is a good experience for you, and on the other hand, as I've mentioned previously, you can usually get some swag for it, so it's a good way to get your foot in the door and get known to various people who might employ you to do stuff in the future. However, if conventions are not a thing you're comfortable with yet, or they just aren't any near you that you can really get to easily, consider reaching out to your friendly local gaming store and asking if they have either Adventure League or Pathfinder Society or whatever form of organized play they host, and get involved with that. Because this also gives you that experience of running for people you may not be familiar with or for people who aren't regulars around your table, and it gives you some sort of structure to work with so that you're used to the basics of running a game for lots of people that you may not know very well, and lots of people who have strategies and thought patterns you are not used to dealing with. Because it has been my experience that more or less that is one of the biggest challenges of being a game master for people you're not familiar with, is they will often go off in directions you could never have predicted, and that's even more so than normal players. As the saying goes, professional soldiers are predictable and amateurs are just chaos. So there's no knowing what you're going to be facing. But let's say that you have lots of experience as a game master. Maybe you've done some of the things that I mentioned. Maybe you've just been a forever DM for so long and you've had so many different groups and people that you're very confident in your abilities to deliver the experience people want. Good for you. The next thing I recommend you do is put together a questionnaire that folks can fill out to tell you what they want, or that you can just go down the list for when someone comes to you with a job. Because you don't just need to know what edition are we playing, how many players are there, and how much are they paying you, and when does the game start. You need to have all the details you can possibly get of how much time do they want this to be. Do they want a single session, or are they looking for a short arc or a full campaign? Are there any particular plots or arcs or subject matter that they do or don't want to deal with? Is there a particular flavor that they want? Are there any sensitivities, whether it's to sound or to flashing lights or any of those things amongst the group? Do they have any materials that they want to use, or are they expecting you to provide all of those things, whether you're being an in-person game master or whether you're doing it over something like Roll20? I highly recommend Consent in Gaming. Has lots of useful forms and lots of useful safety tools that if it turns out someone didn't actually want what they said they wanted, or if someone is getting squicked out, or if someone is uncomfortable, it helps you as a game master reel that back before the experience is tainted too much. But those are all important things you need to know, important things you need to have on hand. And from that point onward, you have most of what you need under your belt ready to go. However, just because you have the experience and you have the tools, the next question is, how are people going to find out about you? How are people going to determine whether they want you to run for them? This is where things can get kind of complicated. As I mentioned previously, it helps if you can volunteer at events, if you can get known in certain circles as a good game master. For example, let's say that you have a small convention you're running a game at, and folks seem to enjoy themselves, they were really having fun, you can tell at the end of a session whether someone really liked it. When that happens, hand out a card, let them know, hey, you're available for folks who are looking for paid services like this for their own events. Maybe you're local to the area, maybe you're willing to do it online. Just getting those cards into people's hands, that's a business move, and that is something that can be very helpful, particularly if you're being paid by the convention or by the business you're running things for. Now you're using that experience to reach out and get more clients, get more knowledge, get a wider base. The more events that you're a part of, the more games you run for people, the more word of mouth will spread. However, I would also recommend that because we live in the technological age, if you want people to discover you, if you want people to have some idea of what they're getting into, consider making some live plays, some let's plays, whatever we want to call them. I forget which is the applicable term right now, of you running games for other people. Not just a trailer of what people could expect from a session, with you, that's very dramatic and very interesting, but have a full, let's say, hour for a very short game to a 3 to 4 hour series. Put it up on YouTube, get yourself a business page, and let people know what they're going to get into. Show them what to expect. And this is since we all live, in the post-Critical Role era now, this is something that people are used to. This is a format that people are more than happy to engage with. And if you make it clear at the end of these sessions that this is the kind of experience you're willing to provide for people, that gives them kind of a sample as to what they're getting into and what they can expect. And on top of that, if the videos you make do really well, in addition to being a business expense, which is handy for your taxes, but in addition to that and to giving people a sample of what they're in for, it also has the chance to get monetized by YouTube, or if you're doing it as a podcast on whatever platform you're using that for. So in addition to being advertising, it's also bringing in additional money for you, which can help even out the odd patches when you don't have as many clients as you might want to have, and you need to keep building your business. It's also important to remember that if you have clients that you think are going to be a lot of fun, or who are comfortable being on camera and who are comfortable being recorded, you can always offer some kind of discount to them, or to make the offer that they could be on your channel if this is something they'd like to see for their game that they're running with you, especially if they have sort of a weird game that you don't get to run very often, or if it's something that you think the public might want to know about. Advertising what you're capable of doing always helps, whether something happens to be really silly and really fun and there's a lot of good outtakes, or if it's very dramatic and very engaging and the plot really rivets people. These are all things you need to consider, because once you choose to become a paid game master, you're no longer just doing this for the love of the game. You are here to be a business, and as I've said repeatedly on this channel, making a living in the gaming sphere is not easy, and you kind of need every advantage that you can get on your side. So while that was a little bit rambly and a little all over the place, I feel that I've spoken my piece on being a paid game master and shared a little bit of my experience with how I've done it in the past and the things that I've found successful. If you out there watching this are a paid game master, or at least have been, leave it in the comments below. Tell us what your experience was like. Did you enjoy it? Is it something you'd recommend other people do? Or do you feel that it's a job that only a select few people are really going to be able to stick with, and other folks just aren't going to enjoy it as much as they think they are? Or if you are someone who has considered hiring a paid game master, what are some questions you have, or what are some experiences that you have had from the player side if you have gone through this? Let us know what your thoughts are and what some of the recommendations you'd make are. But as always, if you have any topics you'd like to see in the future, let me know. And until then, this is your Tabletop Mercenary, signing off. First and foremost, thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If there's a question you have about being an RPG creator, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments below so I can address it in a future episode. If you want to help me keep the lights on and keep this show going, then please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and giving it a share on your own social media pages to help boost the signal. Lastly, if you really enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a tip by buying me a Ko-fi or becoming a Patreon patron at the links in the video description below. You'll find me on both sites under the name The Literary Mercenary.